Welcome to the Success Talk Show, the podcast for ambitious leaders who want to get their best results and create a workplace for their teams to thrive. Each week we share practical advice to help you accelerate your success and grow as an inspiring leader. Now here's your host, Leadership Success Coach, Donna Siriani.
Welcome to another episode of the Success Talk Show. This is Donna Siriani, Leadership Success Coach and founder of Success Compass Academy. In this episode, I'm going to share with you my top tips for your job search. And so I'm curious what brought you to this episode today. Are you already looking for a new role, maybe outside your company? Maybe you're not working right now. And have you reached a point where things just aren't moving as quickly as you'd hoped? You're not finding as many opportunities as you hoped, and maybe things have just really slowed down and you're wondering, how do you get back on track? It could be that you haven't started yet, and so you really want to set yourself up for success. So regardless of where you are today in the process, I'm going to share some tips with you to really help you get the most value and make the most progress on searching for your next role. So tip number one is you want to be clear on the type of work that you most enjoy and are good at. Now, you're probably thinking about your resume, the job interview, what you're going to say, how you're going to position yourself for a role. But before you even get to that point, just between you and I, what do you really love working on? Where do you get your best results? What do you most enjoy working on? What are you hoping is going to be different in that next role that you have? I'll give you an example. I've worked with clients who they've been operational for years. They've been doing project management, some operational work. And what they're really hungry for and really hoping for in their next role is that they'll get the opportunity to be more strategic. That's just one example. Or they want to expand their leadership and just have a bigger impact across a broader organization, building out teams, doing more coaching and mentoring. Or they may want to work with different types of clients. So whatever it is you're aspiring to, you need to put that under a spotlight and be really clear about it. Because that, being clear on your vision, the path that you want to go down, is crucial for you to navigate choices along the way in your job search. Okay. I mean, you've got to be as specific as possible. And I'll, give you some examples later on. We're going to talk about your resume and interviewing and so on, but you're going to want to be specific, because if you don't have a clear idea of what you're aiming for, the job search is going to be pretty frustrating. And when I say clear idea, I don't necessarily mean job titles. I mean, exactly how would you like to be spending 80% of your time? What kinds of work activities? What are your strengths? Okay, that's what I'm really talking about. Now, for some tips on that, you can go to episode number 22, Choosing the Right Path to Move Forward in Your Career. Some really great tips in that episode. Again, episode number 22. And another resource you could take a look at is I have designed a program. It's actually called Acclimate to Accelerate. And you can take a peek at that program by going to the link myownsuccesscompass.com. And I would guide you through how to get clear on your strengths, your values, your passions, your vision for yourself, for your career, for your future, and goal setting. And then how do you put all those pieces together, what I call your unique success compass? They guide you in a certain direction. How do you put those pieces together when you do your resume, your LinkedIn profile? Right? When you're navigating choices in the new job so that you get your greatest satisfaction and make your greatest impact, right? It's a process, but it all starts with being clear. You can't even begin working on your resume or thinking about an interview or any of the steps in the job search without doing a really good job on this first step. Okay. So lots more on that, but those are two resources you could take a look at. Now, tip number 2 is you need to treat your job search like it's a full-time job, 40 hours a week. Now, if you already have a job, then of course that might not be reasonable. If you're already working full-time, then you can decide how much time you can spend. Maybe it's 5 hours a week. Maybe it's only an hour a week. But based on your situation, decide how many hours a week you're going to spend. Now, if you're not working right now and you're feeling like you really are eager to find that next role, then nothing less than 40 hours a week is really going to get you where you want to go. Treat your job search like a full-time job. Mark your calendar, track your time. That's crucial. Now, I have had clients in the past, I'm thinking of one in particular several years ago, that was probably spending maybe 2 or 3 hours a week on her job search, and she was wondering why she wasn't making more progress. So once you're honest with yourself about how much time you're spending on it, you can see that your progress will be in direct proportion to the time and energy that you're putting into it. Makes sense, right? Okay, but you'd be surprised. I coach a lot of people on this. You'd be surprised how many people are just, really fooling themselves into thinking they're spending a lot of time when they're not. So, okay, that's tip number 2. Now, tip number 3 is network, network, network. If you think about the energy that you need to put into your job search, I would spend 80% of your time networking. Set a target for how many people each week you can meet with face to face. Now, if you're working full time and your job search is something that you're putting into your spare hours, then maybe for you, it's, can you meet someone for coffee? Can you meet them for lunch? Can you meet them after work for dinner or drinks? And maybe 1 or 2 people a week is all that you can squeeze into your busy calendar. But again, if you're the person who's not working right now and your job search is your number one priority, you really could set up appointments to meet with people, maybe even every day. So if you devote 40 hours a week, just think of your logistics. How many people each week could you meet with? 3 to 5 is realistic. Again, if you're putting in that kind of time into it, but set a target. Now, for networking, I just want to let you know that 70% of all roles are filled through a personal connection. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that they actually got you a job offer, but it might mean they introduced you to somebody, they knew about a job opening that was a fit for what you're looking for. They introduced you to somebody at that company, could have been the hiring manager, a colleague, HR, but they're a connection into a situation where you might now have a chance at a new job. Now, I'll just tell you a quick story. This has happened to me twice for my last 2 jobs in corporate. In both times, I met someone for lunch where it was social. And in both cases, these were former colleagues. And it turned out they knew someone who was hiring. They didn't know the hiring manager. They weren't going to get me an interview, but they were going to make an introduction. And just based on those introductions, both of them led to positions, I should say, that were career game changers for me. So you just never know. You really can't assume that the person you're about to have coffee with or lunch with, you can't really assume who they know, what they know. You just want to share with them, here's your situation, here's what you're looking for, this would be ideal. And you can ask them, do you know of any position like this that might be available at your company, at another company? Or is there somebody that you would suggest I meet with? Maybe they have a friend or colleague or, past associate that they could introduce you to. So one of the complaints that I hear from most of my clients is that they don't have a very big network, but it's pretty straightforward to start expanding your network. If every person you meet with, you ask them, who do you know that maybe I should speak with? Who'd be a good contact for me? And would you mind introducing me? So every person you meet with, if you ask that question, now you're expanding your network gradually. And so you want to jump on those new contacts to set up time, get the introduction, and now one by one, you're adding more people to your network. Now, of course, it has to be a two-way street. You want to also see what can you do for them. So maybe they're facing some challenges and maybe you have access to resources. So it always has to be mutually satisfying when you're networking and building relationships. But the point here right now is when you have face-to-face meetings with people, again, even if it's just over, 30 minutes, you can really tap into what they're aware of. And if they aren't right in that moment, it could be that a week later, a month later, they'll become aware of something and they'll think of you. That impression is much more lasting when it's face-to-face. Just sending an email and letting someone know, hey, I'm looking for a new job. Here's what I'm looking for. People's inboxes are overflowing these days. And so that is a very ineffective way to manage your communications, your contacts, and your network. You want to meet with people face to face, because literally, if you're sitting there with somebody, let's say you're having lunch with them, over the course of that hour, it could be that suddenly something pops into their head. Hey, now that you mention it, I just thought of somebody that would be a good person for you to reach out to. Or I just thought of a company that I heard they were hiring. Let me introduce you to the person I know there. And that has happened to me time and time again when you're sitting with somebody and you don't have that same chemistry or connection or opportunity when it's a quick email, because they read the email really fast, sort of glaze over it, and then they're off working on their next task. But when you're sitting face to face, it has time to percolate and germinate, and you'd be surprised what can come out of it. So 80% of your job effort needs to be networking. Network, network, network. And when you're thinking about making progress, this would be one of the areas where you would put most of your time. You would spend more time face to face with people than you have in the past. Again, if you're stalling out. Now, tip number 4 is update your LinkedIn profile. Now, I'm going to share more tips with you in an upcoming episode, so be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss it. But what I want to share with you here is, with your LinkedIn profile, as you know, it's your first impression. Your first impression is somebody's going to, maybe if they're going to have lunch with you or they've been introduced to you, the first thing they're going to do is look you up in LinkedIn. So you want to have a professional headshot. There's a summary section where you can have up to 2,000 characters to write a little bit of a bio about yourself, several paragraphs about, who you are, what you're good at, what you're looking for. And you want to take advantage of that real estate on LinkedIn, because people are reading it, hoping to learn a little bit more about you and get to know you. Now, again, I'm going to do another episode with more information, more tips on LinkedIn. But for right now, you really need to make sure you've got professional headshot, professional banner. Make sure your LinkedIn's up to date and make a good impression in that summary section. Take a look at some other people's LinkedIn profiles that you really admire and say, how do theirs look? And just not to copy what they've written, but just to get some ideas of, what you could be doing differently on your own. Now, for some other great tips, podcast episode number 24 of the Success Talk Show, I interviewed Amanda Healy, and the episode is entitled Ninja Tricks on Personal Branding on LinkedIn. And there's some great tips on that episode. Okay. But you've got to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date before you start going full court press on your networking, because again, that's the first place people are going to look for you, and they're going to want to get to know you by reading your profile. Now, tip number 5 is your resume. The first thing you can do is be sure to share your resume with at least 5 people who know you really well and ask them the question, what's missing? Does this look like I'm putting my best foot forward? Is there anything I should change here? And just send that out and ask 5 people who know you really well to give you honest feedback. Now, the reason for doing this is what I have found through the years is that you are probably not emphasizing enough something you're really good at because you take it for granted. And yet it could be the one thing that's going to distinguish you from the competition. It could be an accomplishment, a quality about yourself, something about what you typically contribute that just doesn't show up or come across strongly enough in the resume. Because what I've seen is most people, and this may or may not be you, are really humble, and they put things in really basic, plain, uninteresting language because they don't want to oversell themselves, don't want to brag, don't want to come across too strong. And so what ends up happening is the resume becomes just a little on the boring side. So you're looking to those 5 people who know you really well to give you some feedback and tell you, hey, something about you that you're really good at that I don't even see you mentioning. Or, hey, remember that project you worked on? That was huge. That was a great contribution. You didn't even mention that. Or maybe just some language to spice it up a little bit. So that can be really helpful. Now, I work with my clients on their resumes when they're going through my program. Again, myownsuccesscompass.com is where you can find out more about the program. But what I do is I help them get really clear on their personal brand, what they're good at. As I mentioned in tip number 1, I help them get clear on what do they really want to attract. So in the resume, you're designing it so that when you're attracting a new job opportunity and you get your foot in the door for that interview, you want to make sure that that resume is a fantastic representation of you, your brand, what you have to offer, what's unique about you, and a little bit of your personality shows. Now, the trick, of course, is that you really need to make an impression within 10 seconds. Otherwise, someone may not keep reading your resume. They look at the top section. If it doesn't immediately grab them, they get a bad impression because of the language, the way it looks. Doesn't appear to be a good fit. You don't have the right skills. They kind of make a really quick 10-second decision to keep reading or put it aside. And obviously you want to make a really good impression. So I can help you walk through that and make sure that your resume is really in alignment with your personal brand. But the tips to get you started are share it with 5 people who know you, because they can give you some fantastic advice just to get you started. Now, in a future episode, I'll go into more detail on that. But you want to have your resume reflect what you have accomplished. Okay? It's not just what you are capable of doing, it's what you have done. When people read your resume, they're looking for evidence on what you have actually accomplished. Okay? And you can keep fine-tuning your resume as you go through the job search. You may be learning more about yourself, getting feedback, getting more clear. So your resume doesn't have to be cast in stone. As you learn more, you can fine-tune it, enhance it, update it, so it continues to get better and better. Now, tip number 6 is, I mentioned that 80% of your time should be spent on networking. I would leave the other 20% for working with recruiters and doing online applications. So depending what level you're at in the organization, if you're a senior leader, then most senior leadership positions are going to go through recruiters. And I'm sure you know that probably there are retained searches where the company has retained a recruiting firm. They're paying them a fee to go out and find the best candidates possible for that role. You probably will not find those very senior positions online. So for recruiters, I encourage you to reach out to those recruiters that fit for your industry. Reach out, establish a relationship, see if they would like to work with you and support you. But you can't put too much stock on that, because they're really working on behalf of their client, which would be the hiring manager at the company that they're recruiting for. And so you may feel, a lot of my clients feel like, well, I've reached out to these recruiters and it's quiet, I don't hear back. And that's because if you're not a fit for what they're actively recruiting for right now, you're really in a database, right? They're not actively out there looking for you to find your perfect role. That's pretty rare. They're looking for the right candidates for the positions they're actively recruiting for. And the same goes with online applications. Now, if the type of role you're looking for is online, you need to jump on those, but only spend a minimal amount of time doing it, because the competition for online applications is pretty significant. It's one of the least effective ways to find a role. You may really increase your success by seeing if you know somebody at that company, making a personal connection, and coming in multiple ways. But if all you're doing is applying online, it's just statistically, it's going to be the least effective method for getting your foot in the door. So I'm not saying don't do it. It's just you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and think that's going to be your answer. I once had a client many years ago who, when I met him, that's what he was doing. He was applying online to dozens and dozens and dozens of positions. He had a fairly senior position in sales and was now looking for a new role. And it was clear that that just wasn't getting him anywhere. And what he really needed to do is get out there and start networking and spend more time talking to people that he'd worked with prior and all the things that I mentioned to you earlier. So just don't put all your eggs in one basket. That should be a small percentage of your time. Okay? It's just one avenue. Now, tip number 7 is that I'd like you to create a dashboard. Call it a dashboard or a scorecard, but you want to capture the activities, the effort, the hours you're putting in, who you're meeting with, what you're focused on. Track those activities, because what you track and measure, you improve. And what you focus on, you attract more of. So if you were doing process improvement in your organization, that's what you would be saying. You'd say, okay, I know if we track it and measure it, we can improve it. And it's the same thing with your job search. Now, it allows you to be honest with yourself, because if you aren't seeing any results, you're not getting anywhere. And, then you need to take a realistic look at what you've been doing. So, for example, if you're only spending 10 hours a week and you're not making the kind of progress that you want, you might need to increase your time and effort to 40 hours a week. It's going to be a big, big difference. Spend a lot more time meeting with people. Now, if you've fallen into the habit of sending out emails, applying for jobs online, as I mentioned, those are your least effective ways to move your job search forward. So if you're avoiding setting up those face-to-face meetings, you need to ask yourself, well, what's holding you back? Is it that you see yourself as more of an introvert and you don't have really a very big network? Okay, so if that's the case, start small. Start with people that you know, only meet with them one-on-one. There's no reason to go to big networking events with dozens of people. Sometimes you can accomplish much more by just start with the people you know. And when you've exhausted that, right, you've met with everybody for either coffee, lunch, dinner, drinks, or whatever. When you've exhausted that, then make sure you're also following up with the people that they've introduced you to. You know, friend of a friend, a colleague, a former colleague, an associate, a client, and really make sure that you're keeping up the momentum. Okay. And whatever it is that you've noticed, when you create your own scorecard or dashboard, then you're able to see what is working for you and what isn't, so that then you can figure out what to do differently. Again, I'm going to tell you, I've worked with so many people on this through the years, and I would say the number one thing is people not putting in enough time. Because we kid ourselves into thinking, well, I've submitted my resume, I've met with a recruiter, I've had a couple of lunches, and in your mind you're thinking, that feels like a lot of activity. But I want you to really raise the bar and track your hours. Whether it's 10 hours a week or 40 hours a week, be honest with yourself, and maybe you're capturing this all in Excel, but at the end of a week, how many hours did you put in and what exactly did you do? Where did it get you? Okay, so those are my top 7 tips. And like I said, don't feel badly if these are things that you really haven't addressed, because these are the most common areas where I see people get off track. So anyway, I hope you found this episode helpful. There are 2 other episodes I want to point you to. If you're looking for a new leadership role, episode 3 is fantastic. I interviewed Dave Melville, the CEO of the Bowden Group, which is a premier recruiting firm in the Boston area. And he talks about the most sought after leadership skills in his experience. He offers a lot of great advice on positioning yourself for a new role. So definitely take a listen to that one. And another one that's really good is if you are interested in working for a startup, then take a look at episode number 6, being successful working for a startup. It's not for everybody, so if you're thinking about it, that would be a great episode to listen to. I interview Frederick Rasmussen, who's the CEO of Inroad, based in New York City, and he talks about what really will make you the most successful in a startup environment. So that's another good one. Anyway, to make sure you don't miss the next episodes on LinkedIn and creating a winning episode and acing the interview, be sure to click on the subscribe button within iTunes so you automatically receive those episodes and you get those downloaded. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and have a great day.